Assistant Professor of History at Wabash College, and I have the privilege of introducing to you today our panel, Military Stories, Battlefield, Trauma, Service, and Healing. I'm going to do a quick introduction of each of the presenters, and then I will talk a little bit about the format. But first we have Ellen Brooks. Ellen is a graduate of Columbia University's Master of Arts in Oral History. She's currently the oral historian at the Wisconsin Veterans Museum, where she manages the oral history program, collects oral histories from Wisconsin veterans, and supervises the preservation and accessibility of the oral history collection. Next, we have Helen Gibb. Helen is a graduate student, currently in her master's program at the Columbia University. She's originally from the UK and has earned her BA from the University of Cape Town. She's also currently an assistant for the oral history program at the Wisconsin Veterans Museum, and her research includes narratives of trauma, veterans' histories, and using oral history in the classroom. And finally, we have Patrick Russell, who also has Wisconsin connections, having earned his BA in political science from Marquette University before moving on to the University of Miami School of Law, where he earned his JD. He's currently the senior attorney at the Florida Bar, as well as the founder of the Making History Project, an independent scholar on World War II, a contributor to the U.S. Library of Congress Veterans History Project, and a volunteer with the University of Florida's Samuel Proctor Oral History Project on Veterans. He's very busy. It makes us all feel a little smaller this morning. So how this will work is each of the presenters will have about 20 minutes to present their work to you, and then at the end of all of the presentations, we'll open it up for about 30 minutes of questions and comments. Okay, thank you. And
great.
Good morning. My name is Patrick Russell. I'm also a lawyer and an oral historian. And this is my project, the Making History Project. It involves a topic on trauma and World War II veterans. And I'm based out of Miami, Florida. And what we are, well, you're looking at the Making History Project right now. It's grassroots. I'm not funded by an institution, nor an academic institution or a museum at this point. I formed a Florida nonprofit. I'm looking to transition over to this full-time at some point. That's why I'm working as hard as I am doing all this. And the purpose of all of this is to really serve the veterans and their families and to make a record. And that's why I call it the Making History Project, because that's what I think that I do. And how do we do this? Well, we engage veterans, preserving their memory, and doing that through the archives with the U.S. Library of Congress, the National World War II Museum, and the University of Florida Samuel Proctor Oral History Project. And I also give the veterans at the conclusion of my interviews a copy of the DVD right away. So it's a keepsake. And then later on, I will get them an edited version. Now, my current research is on trauma, combat trauma, which we consider to be the silent injury. PTSD has been talked about a lot with the returning veterans from Iraq, Afghanistan. It started with Vietnam. And I wanted to know, well, did it really impact the greatest generation, our World War II veterans? Did they have lasting scars from their combat from 70 years ago? That was a question I was interested in. And why is that relevant? Well, they have this stereotype. I grew up idolizing these guys. They're grim, determined, strong, silent. They're just doing their job. And they're portrayed like this through all of our pop culture, from comic books like Sergeant Rock, which is a favorite of mine, to Saving Private Ryan, Fury, John Wayne. We all are familiar with these characters. But does reality really match this stereotype? And that's the question and the purpose of my current research. They came home to a lot of fanfare, unlike some of our other veterans. They went to school on the GI Bill. They started a family, and they never really talked about the war. And that's interesting. Why? Why did that happen? And I'm finding now that a lot of them do talk about it at the twilight of their lives at this point. And some of these gentlemen now talk to me with their family members, and their family members routinely will say, listen, I've never heard that story before. They've never spoke about the war. It's so interesting that you are able to come into this living room and they open up to you. So where am I at right now? Well, I started this a year ago. So far, I've got 22 interviews completed. I've got 20 other ones to do that are hard interviews, just a matter of getting out and doing them. I'm working on attending reunions. That's where you get a lot of these veterans at their reunions. Going to conferences such as this, and going to battlefields and the memorials such as in Normandy. And I'm working hard, you know, at night and when I can, editing and transcribing all this stuff, and then eventually sending it to the archives. So, what are my preliminary results? This is the fun stuff. Okay, this is where I saved up, and I took some of the excerpts from some of the veterans, and I honed them down for you to see, because I think that their words speak better than mine as to what actually they're going through and how they feel. So some of the preliminary results is that, yes, it's not a surprise. Some of these veterans match this stereotype. They are. They don't admit that they've had any trauma. They're grim, they're determined, and they're hard guys, and they're fun, but you know, nothing bothered them. They could walk through a wall, even today. Okay, that's the persona that they have, and you're going to see some of that right now. This first veteran is William Montgomery. He was a Marine. He did the Iwo Jima landing, and if you know your history, that was a pretty little bloody conflict on a small little Pacific island. He was there on Iwo Jima 1 and all the way through 37 days of that battle. It was a very, very hardcore battle, and he admittedly in his interview told me that there were at least 600 incidents that he could count or he remembered in which he came 1 inch of losing his life. There was that many bullets flying that close to him, grenades, artillery, etc. But notwithstanding all of that, this is what he had to say.
Did you experience or suffer any trauma from the war?
Before, after, or during, or when?
During?
No.
And afterwards?
No.
Oh.
You hear all the, what's the term? The terms that so many Afghanistan and Far East
PTSD?
groups. What do you call them? They have post-traumatic stress disorder. Yeah. We didn't know that term. I never had any post-traumatic term. We came back home and I tried to forget about the war and went to school. I did whatever we were supposed to do normally did. But I'm sure there were a number of them that I didn't know that they had post-traumatic stress disorder.
And the people that cracked up, what would be the percentage of people you saw that did that?
A little context to this question. Earlier during the interview, he mentioned some incidents where he saw people cracking up, where they cowered in a foxhole through artillery and started running blindly around. And so I inquired a little bit more, and this is his response about that.
Your comrades.
Look, I didn't know. I didn't know the count, but I would estimate that not over 2%. I would estimate, maybe way off. It wasn't a high percentage. We didn't know that we were supposed to crack up.
Okay, so 2 comments on that. 1, 2% I would think that would be an incredibly low amount or number for veterans that were on Iwo Jima that would suffer some sort of an injury on that battlefield. And then even asking him this, he didn't take it very seriously, saying he didn't know that he had to crack up. And I thought that was kind of a curious comment. But he's a grizzled Marine who would never admit in a day that he was bothered by anything. So he fits the stereotype perfectly. This veteran is Robert Chisholm, and I met him at a veterans reunion gathering for the 508th Parachute Infantry Regiment, and he was part of the 82nd Airborne. But he served not only in World War II, but Korea and Vietnam. He's highly decorated, and he has a very cold gray stare that would make you want to leave the room immediately when he looks at you, if he looks at you the wrong way. Now, this is some of his responses.
Have you ever heard of the phrase that war is hell?
Yes, I have.
You agree with that?
I agree with that.
How so? What was your experience that you would agree with that statement?
Well, the experience that leads me to say that more than anything is the fact that those soldiers that you served with and became, you're not blood brothers, but you really are to become brothers. There is no closer relationship than serving with a man in combat. And when you see him killed, it's just devastating. Don't ever forget it. And there's nothing more horrible than to lose so many of your friends in this association. And I don't recall.
The context to my next inquiry is if he had any experience with other veterans telling him that they had problems with whether you want to call it combat fatigue, shell shock, PTSD, and this was his response.
Having discussed this at any length with anyone shortly after World War II, now here are in the reunions that we have, you get a little more information on how the people felt back then. They're able to ventilate their emotions a little more because in World War II, there's no way that a man is going to admit that he's being shell shocked or he's being fearful of being going in and fighting him again. Where he was or he wasn't, it just didn't happen.
So there you go.
You said earlier that being a combat veteran, 3 wars, that
the idea is that for him, the culture back then would not permit you to essentially admit that you had those type of problems while in the field. But now that he goes to reunions and later in life that these gentlemen and his friends and his colleagues are opening up, they do admit that they had problems. So some still are stone cold, stone faced, and don't admit it, but even to him now, they are eventually. So now here, there are, the other part of my preliminary results are there are veterans, surprisingly, that do admit it. And they don't match the stereotype, and they do admit combat trauma to me. And these include, nightmares and hypervigilance. And these effects last to this day, 70 years later. And some of these examples are here. Now, this is Rock Merritt, and he is one of the most highly decorated members of the 82nd Airborne. He's a command sergeant major, one of the oldest living ones. And to this day, if he goes to Fort Bragg, the 3-star general there will salute him, which is pretty impressive. So he lives right near Fort Bragg. He was mentioned by President Obama during the speech for the 70th anniversary of Normandy and D-Day. And this is what he has to say. And actually, I kind of think that the Sergeant Rock comics are actually about him. I don't think it's a surprise. He has that type of personality.
You get ready, the green light, a red light comes on, and you stand up and hook up. Then you got a little butterflies in your stomach. So it's just not natural. for a man to jump out of a plane at 1,500 feet with a little ball of silk on his back. If the guy tells me, no, I've never had butterflies, I'll tell him he's either a liar or he's an idiot, one of the two. You know? Because the guy that actually threw the grenade got a Bronze Star with a V in it. You know? So,
You recall his name?
yeah, I'll think of his name. He got killed in 50 yards from where that tank was sitting on that bridge. 88, he was dug in on his back and had 88 direct hit on him, just blew him all to pieces. Oh, I thought I'd never get. He's got.
You were telling me about how war is hell. Are you agree with?
Now, the reason I had that second clip is he was talking early in the interview about that friend of his. And he talked about him being blown to bits, but he didn't really show too much emotion. And I thought that was kind of curious because it was a close friend of his. And he just said it, it was terrible, he was blown to bits, but he kind of avoided the conversation, as you saw. And these next slides are going to show you how he's kind of an enigma, Rock. He's kind of that tough bravado guy, but yet he does have some moments, and you're going to see them here. So he's kind of a mixture of having, one foot, the tough guy, the other one still had some problems. I want you to watch his body language.
That statement.
Yeah.
Did this impact you at all after the war?
Oh yeah, it did.
How so?
I'm on disability on nightmares and stuff like that. 6% disability. And, they ask you, yeah, didn't you I took training after doctors after World War II, but it didn't do no good. So I just had to live with it. I said, yeah. You still have nightmares? Yeah, I certainly do. I said, how many? I have a couple of weeks every night, a couple of weeks. And so, like I say,
So, do you notice how he was fidgeting? This is the strong, tough guy, fidgeting, looking down, moving his feet around, kind of avoiding eye contact.
Even to this day, 70 years after D-Day, you still have reflections and nightmares about it.
yeah.
It's a very impactful event.
Well, it's all the people that I guess I lost here now. I was a squad leader. I lost all of them except one man in Normandy. And then they promoted me to buck sergeant, so now I've got 20 men, instead of a squad. And I lost a lot of those on in Holland, on Devil's Hill they call it in Holland, in what day. So of course, then I lost a lot in the Battle of Bulge. We're still going on in World War II, and I got the Silver Star on the 4th of July, But
I love the way he ended that. So he was talking about all the men that he lost, and he recited the battles, and then he ended it with, I got the Silver Star on the 4th of July. It was an interesting segue for him. This is Robert Shelteau. I met him in St. Mary Glace in Normandy, and he's a combat engineer and a weapons sergeant. And he went through the Battle of the Bulge, and this is what he has to say about what he experiences.
And did that impact you after you left the service? That type of
no. The only thing that I ever experienced, and I could probably experience a little bit of that today, so 70 years later, are shoe mines. And shoe mines are made up of plastic, explosive,
and they're built to blow a pussyfoot off. And the Germans literally scattered millions and millions of those things around. And a lot of people lost legs because of that. And so you're always cautious when you step someplace. And I don't know how to explain it, but that type of feeling would go on for years and years and years. That you're always conscious of where you put your feet.
And to this day,
Huh?
to this day,
Not too much now. Not too much. Yeah, it could be. In my mind, would go back to that. Yeah.
So he said that even while he's there for the celebration, he still remembers these things, and it lasted a long time where he was scanning. That's hypervigilance, looking for things that were not where they're supposed to be because he didn't want to lose his foot. So even when he went back home, he still experienced that. And our final excerpt is from Dwayne Pinkston, and he was a combat medic in the 82nd Airborne from D-Day all the way through the Battle of the Bulge. And a very nice gentleman. His nickname is Pinky.
And I did all right. One time I started crying up there. It was just about the end of the war. It was wet and raining and cold and dark, you know. And when I told the Lord, if I ain't gonna make it, take me now. I said, I had about all I can tell you.
what would, prior to combat, what would some of the soldiers do or talk about? Anything?
Prior to combat, well,
Can you tell stories about home, or did you do things to get your mind off?
I'll tell you, when those guys were hit bad, usually to their mother. Yeah. Usually they all think of their mother. And yeah, you gotta have a lot of faith, I tell you.
Well, there's a reason I saved that slide for last, is I think it's very powerful. And that's really the summation right now where I'm at. It's still early, but all these veterans have powerful memories. I have mixed results. I have the bravado, the common stereotype, and I do have a lot of the combat trauma still present 70 years later. And it seems to be trending in that direction. And what I need to really still kind of examine is the differences, and in terms of why is that? Is it a matter of them being directly in the field, a medic that sees a lot of the trauma compared to maybe a radio operator back in the field, the intensity of their experiences, and I want to look at bravado as maybe just being a suppression, because maybe they do have combat, they still don't want to admit it even 70, they still have trauma, they just don't want to admit it still 70 years later. That's all I have. Thank you.